to all of you. Can I please ask my panelists to join me this time? So Raul, Danijel, Tina, and Tanja, are you here with me? Yes, great. Okay, I couldn't be happier. So welcome all my panelists, and again, welcome everyone who didn't join us in the first part. It's great to have you here. So when thinking about what topic that could be of interest to all of you, right? Fellows, thought partners, I reached out to Åsa, the managing director of IKEA Social Entrepreneurship, who has been the partner in crime for us since we signed this partnership 8 years ago. And we brainstormed together. And something she mentioned kind of stayed with me. She said, Maria, this program was a very unique way to develop leadership, or is a very unique way to develop leadership in the companies and the people we work with. So why don't we talk about leadership? And she was right, because across the multiple editions of the Accelerator, we've noticed something very consistent. And that is that something shifts in the people who go through. And it's not just about helping them with sharper strategies or with clearer plans. But what we've seen is that it really changes the way they lead. This kind of transformation is way deeper than what you normally would get in traditional leadership programs. And so today, what we were hoping to achieve is to really understand what that is, what makes this different. We kind of have a clue on what could be happening, and that is that in the settings we create, people are pushed to listen differently. Some people I've heard is like, I need to be a fly on the wall at the beginning. I need to listen, I need to understand. And that's very unusual for me in my work. We also, it's a setting where they challenge their own assumptions. They collaborate among realities that are very different from each other. Someone working in a slum and someone working in a corporate office. And they definitely go beyond ready-made answers. I think in this program, or what we are able to see, is that leaders grow not because we tell them how to lead, but really because they are required to show different, and they are required to show up in different ways as well. So the question for this panel is not really whether leadership changes through this kind of work, because we know it does, but it's more what is happening in those experiences that help us understand, maybe to create new leadership opportunities, etc. No? So we will first start by hearing from Raul and Danijel, who took part in this program as thought partners. And let me pause here for a minute, because this role is extremely important for our program, and I believe is what makes it very unique. These thought partners are not advisors or external experts who come in and provide some ideas. No, they really sit alongside the fellow and their team, hand in hand, week after week, during the Accelerator process, sharing the responsibility for the thinking, asking the tough questions to each other, and really going through the strategic choices that happen in the journey. They spend a lot of hours with our fellows. They can range between 1 or 2 to many, many more every week. And they show up every week with the same intent to really think this through together with the fellow and the team. To bring this to life a little bit, I'm going to actually start with Raul and Danijel, who did it firsthand, so they can share with us how this experience has really impacted you and the way you work and the way you lead. So Raul, can we start with you? Can you share us a little bit about your experience and how that has shifted?
Of course. Thank you, first of all, for the opportunity to be in here, and big congratulations to Ashoka and everyone for this beautiful anniversary. It's an honor to be here today. Your question, Maria, is very interesting because for a long time, I believe that leadership was about perfecting, making better my own cogwheel in the machinery. So I thought it was about making my team more efficient, more visible, and more successful within our scope. It is through the work that I did in DELA program that I was looking at the intersection between IKEA's global reach and Ashoka's systemic depth. And then while going back to my team every day, it was a good thought on my team is not a destination, it's actually an entry point. And that was a turning point for me in my leadership. This turning point, looking back, happened a very particular moment. It was at the end of this strategic phase with the fellow I was working with, Plastify. And we were looking at different paths for experimentation and trying to decide which route would be the most impactful. In the heat of that debate, it took us several weeks, it hit me. We were not just looking for more customers or partners. We were looking for the levers that would shift the conditions that in this case would allow plastic waste to cease to exist in the first place. So when I go back to my team, I realized that it isn't working towards volume by itself, and that means hitting more goals and being faster and more effective. Doing that, we may grow, but many of the root problems will remain unsolved and untouched. So I thought that if I lead towards systemic health, we will not just get stronger as a team, we will change the DNA of how we do business. So for me, that was a very interesting pivot. I stopped asking, how do I scale my team solutions? And I started asking, how do I scale the logic behind it? I've done several leadership programs, and most of them, they teach you how to protect and strengthen your competitive advantage and how to sharpen your specific leadership skills. But working in DELA changed me because it demanded a shift in my leadership. I realized that leadership is very ineffective without a strong systemic purpose. The true impact in any business only happens when you design your work to be shared, adapted, and woven into the existing infrastructure of the world. So I come back to this idea sometimes, and I call it scale of purpose. So I honestly say I lead in a different way today. I'm no longer just managing a team that sits in one part of a big machine. I'm trying to build, together with my team, a web of systemic change in the business I am. And that shift from being a goal hero, if we can say it this way, into a system weaver is a transformation that I haven't found anywhere else, but in here. So I have to appreciate and thank you everyone that has been there together, and to DELA and particularly to Unplastify team for such a gift. I couldn't get it anywhere else.
Wow, Raul, that's hard to follow. Thank you so much for that sharing.
Thank you.
It was absolutely beautiful to understand, and I heard you for the first time, and it was, yeah, really impactful. Danijel, I know that it's hard to follow, but what about you?
Yeah, exactly. I am going to try. Let me try this. There are three messages I want to leave you with in my short section. One is my own personal journey with Ashoka, so I can tell you what we does for an individual leader. And second, I want to tell you how it changed my leadership. And I think it changes leadership of those around me as well, because also I tend to pull people into what happens here so that they see what is happening in other parts of the world and also just out of corporate environment, which I think is a very big criteria. And then I want to finish with some thanks. And I want to really emphasize that we are celebrating today, but also sometimes the impact of what Ashoka does is systemic in itself, just by Ashoka existing, not only its fellows. So my journey, I started this in 2020. So I'm now 6 years in, and I always joke, every year I expect you guys to kick me out, and yet you invite me back, and I'm still somehow around. And the reality is, this is the first time I had an opportunity to work for a social venture, right? And it has a way of removing all the fluff and the safety nets that the corporate environment brings, right? I work for Philips. When I started, I was a director. Now I'm a senior executive. I'm accustomed to matrix organization, hundreds of people, glorious strategies, just a lot of documents, PowerPoints, board meetings, conversations that sometimes never endingly continue and until the window closes, right? And then of course there's nothing to talk about anymore. And when you meet somebody who is starting something very bare bones out of pure passion, and whose biggest problem is figuring out how to not try to boil the ocean in the first week, that's a very different leadership experience. And when you don't have the training wheels on, you also have to get to the core of the problem very quickly. So the way you start analyzing things, choosing strategies with the big emphasis on the word choose, and how do you operationalize them when you don't have infinite amount of money, funds, and politics that goes around it, it's a very different ballgame. And I've loved doing this for the last 7 or 8 years. I come in every time, and I think many of you experience this, and every time you experience just a lot of passion to deliver on something that's not the bottom line, it's bottom line for the world. So you have passion, you have purpose, and then you have just the need to be very, very sharp in the basic fundamentals that you're working on. You don't get the fluff to work with. I think, going to my second point, that transfers into how I lead, right? I default to first principles. I push people to think with a scarcity mindset and then turn it into abundance mindset. And there is a lot of growth in just going back to basics and making sure those basics are really sharp. Again, I speak for Philips, but I'm sure there are many companies that fall into that. Once you become big and once you become bold, it's easy to also get complacent and not think sharp about these things. And on some of the things that we work on, we don't have that luxury. I work in medtech. There are 900 million people around the world who do not have therapy for the disease state that we heal. So every moment we spend debating over whether the P&L is going to lean a little bit left or a little bit right is a few people that don't get medicine. And that is just not acceptable. We would all benefit by being more operationally fast and sharp on what we do. And then I want to go to the third one. First of all, I really want to thank people who are here on the screen. I've joined both Della and Boehringer Ingelheim initiatives. I keep going back to Philips Foundation and asking them when we are going to expand our program, and hopefully one of these days we will. But it also takes companies who invest goingly into this. I know there are years when P&L doesn't look all that nice, and the first thing you want to do is jump out of it, but staying consistent is important. Otherwise, these things don't work. And the fact that Ashoka has been around and these companies have been around means every year 5, 10, 20 of these leaders emerge. And they are the ones who are going to change the world with the way they work. We're not going to change it sitting in boardrooms and debating, quarterly reports. That is a waste of time. It's been a pleasure and an honor to stay around. I'm going to stick around for as long as people on the screen don't kick me. Nadine is smiling. That is still good news. Means she still has patience with me. And just look forward to many more years of this. I intend to be around for the 30th year celebration as well.
Wow, absolutely you will. Thank you so much, Danijel. And, I just wish we had three times the time so we could double click on so many of those things. We'll probably organize a panel just for us guys, okay, and ladies. So that's in the making. We'll definitely quote you there, Danijel. Thank you so much for sharing. And now let me introduce you to 2 women who are leading the partnerships we have with IKEA and Boehringer Ingelheim, who have taken this opportunity of leadership development and applied it to their organization at an organizational scale. Tina and Tanja, first of all, thank you for being here with us. I'm sorry for the tech hiccups that were earlier, but it's great that you finally made it with us. You've both been deeply involved in co-creating the programs with us, and more important, engaging those employees that then participate as thought partners, STPs, etc., through our partnerships. That gives you a good understanding of what happens not only for one person, as Danijel and Raul have shared, but more as for many, for the organization. You see patterns that emerge across people, roles, context. So what we'd love to understand is, what are you noticing? What are you learning? So Tina, I'm going to go first with you and ask you, what do you think shifts, or what seems to shift for people as they engage in these interactions and these journeys with social entrepreneurs? And how do you see that showing up in their leadership over time?
Thank you, Maria. So first of all, engaging in this program, in the DELA program, opens a door to a world that inspires and nurturing the entrepreneurial mindset many of us at IKEA have. So I think throughout the years, we have seen how our values, with Ashoka values, and now in DELA's values, how we share them and how we together are creating this great program. I think, and I'm so happy Raul also share that, but I think the method in the Globalizer phase and the structured ways of working in that, in combination with the interaction with the social entrepreneurs, really gives the co-workers a great foundation to take actions. And these actions could be smaller things, but it could also be bigger things, but everything counts here. So many of our co-workers that has been part of this program, and there are close to 600 now in many of our programs, and every DELA program is around 70 co-workers. So it's a lot of co-workers in this program, but many of them are commenting on the speed and the agile way of working of the social entrepreneurs. Because working in a big company like IKEA with established processes and ways of working, you kind of following the flow, which you should, because that's why the processes are there. But you can be blind, and then you don't see sometimes the need of improvement. So what we hear is that being inspired of the social entrepreneurs, co-workers starts to look, what can they adjust? They see things with a different perspective, exactly as Raul shared here earlier. And we know this experience is integrating into their leaderships. What it is very individually. It could be small adjustments at work, but for others, it can be a new direction in life. We have seen many different stories here. But we also know that they by being part of this program, they practice, or they also get access to a new set of leadership tools. And one that many often mention is that when they join the program, they come in there with a typical IKEA mindset. I'm here to do things. I'm here to solve things. I'm here to share my experience. And when they have been there a couple of weeks, they realize, oh no, this is not at all my job. My job is to listen and ask some challenging questions. And that is the best support they can do. So really practicing these listening skills. But of course, they're also there to share their IKEA knowledge. And what I see is that they come out from these programs and have built their confidence, because they realize also how much they know, and that the experience, and many of this has been with IKEA for many, many years, and they can see how also this is valuable outside of IKEA, and it is really useful for the social entrepreneur. And what I like the most is that what I see is many of those who has especially been in the DELA program is the capability to see the organization as a system, and working with not only they have the performance mindset, but also working with the underlying root causes and structures that are sometimes hindering us. So knowing that by participating in this program develops your entrepreneurial mindset, inspires you to take action, practicing some leadership tools, building your competence and your confidence, but also working with system change here. We have since many years collaborating with a leadership program within IKEA called IKEA Next Generation Leaders Program. So we are pairing a senior IKEA business leader with one participant from this program. And there are so many bonuses with this. The social entrepreneurs get two different perspectives from IKEA, from the senior, the leadership participant. They support each other. They throughout the program, they learn from each other, and they share also IKEA's different realities. So we say that by collaborating with this leadership program, we foster a new generation of leaders, because they learn about social impact, they learn about the new sector, they learn about the new geography, and many, many more things. And we can see how that is integrated in the leaderships. So they are definitely not the same persons as they were when they joined the program, when they leave the program. Last but not least, what we hear is that people are so proud of the work that they are doing and the contribution they do to this program. And I think contributing with something so meaningful is what many people wish for. But also that IKEA has this kind of philanthropic work, and how we can contribute to the bigger picture. So it says so much about IKEA's cultural values by having this program, engaging co-workers. And there was actually one thought partners that once said, by contributing here, supporting a social entrepreneur, this is where the IKEA culture and values really kicks in. So what we often say to as an advice when we onboard our thought partners, just be yourself and be open for new things and do things. This will be an experience that you never will forget. And I think that's true.
Thank you so much, Tina. Beautiful, absolutely. Goosebumps going all over my body. Those 700 co-workers join our program because of you, because of your conviction, because of your passion, because you call many of them and you first. And now, of course, it's a little bit growing through mouth of whatever, you see? Yeah.
Word of mouth.
Word of mouth. Thank you, Nadine. Yes, but it was you and your passion and your leadership and your conviction that made this happen, and we can't thank you enough. Tanja, you came on board a year, 2 years ago, and you kind of co-created a whole new thing together with our team. In our partnership with Boehringer, you have adapted the Accelerator to include your employees as case givers, working hand in hand with Ashoka Fellows as co-creators, co-developing system strategies to really solve for problems that both parties are solving for. Very innovative, very creative. We want to hear all about it. So tell us a little bit more, how is the experience going? And also from a standpoint of development of employees, what have you learned? What have you seen? So please.
Thank you very much, Maria. And I cannot start without, this is a celebration, right? And the celebration of 15 years, we're only part of the Globalizer team for a shorter time. But I really want to congratulate you with all the work that has been done, and also across the companies that we have here in the panel. And I realize as well how we are learning as corporates from each other. So while we speak, so that's already, I would say a present and a gift from your side as a connector and a bridge between, not only corporates, but of course also with the social entrepreneurs. And maybe also sharing one thing personally, and then I come to all the questions that you raise, right? Because I think it's also important to understand for everyone that these journeys are long, right? To really get a culture in a shared way, and designing that. So just to understand, Boehringer Ingelheim is a large company, so 160 countries. We started that collaboration with the wider Ashoka team already in 2010. And we have been building, I think, also a changemaker culture in our own organization by supporting, by now 200 social entrepreneurs, but at the same time also doing already programs like executive in residence, like voluntary engagement, like financial support with the social entrepreneurs, and then collaborating on a local level in our countries with each other. So I think that, that setting the scene, if you like, from a couple of years made it also possible that we could, when we decided to collaborate now with the Globalizer, and actually we looked at the DELA program, right? So we stole with pride, let's be honest, and what you also created already. And we said, oh, that would be good as a next development step, basically, also for what we achieved with the social entrepreneurs, collaborating, learning from every social entrepreneur in the countries, and at the same time changing our own culture, like Tina also described, right? With entrepreneurial skills, with strategic skills, with understanding, what's out there in the world. And then indeed we started the Globalizer program. In the Boehringer context, we call it social innovation hubs. And the reason why we do that is that indeed we want to have that innovative part for all parties involved, right? So we said it's very good that our employees also support the growth and the impact of the social enterprises. So that's also still part of our program, right? That's also happening. But it would also be great to get it even closer into our changes in the world, right? That it is actually, there's something at stake for our employees. And what is very nice to see now, and Nadine and Akarsha are very much engaged in this, right, is that if a employee in a country says, I want to drive a project, but you know what? I have an idea. I don't know yet how I can do this. I made maybe my first stakeholder map, but I have my own funnel, let's say. Of course, everyone has that. That is a perfect moment to say, why don't you bring this into the Social Innovation Hub? And then really allowing the project to be strategized, to have stakeholder engagement, to think systematically about how to drive that project with scalability, or at least the impact in mind for the long term. So that has been so impactful already in only 2 years, basically, or 2 cohorts, where we've seen that out of the 6 teams, cohort 1 and 6 teams, cohort 2, that we have now 3 teams that are really driving their own project, of course, with a social entrepreneur very close by. And so also the knowledge and experience of social enterprises, I think, is much better used almost, right? Or embedded in that project. And then, of course, everybody learns. The employees for sure, but also I think the social entrepreneurs, and then of course the communities for which you want to create the impact. So it's a very appreciative way of working, I would say, with huge amount of learnings. And I think in the earlier call, someone mentioned it's a way beyond ourselves, right? So you step out of your own limitations, I would almost say, and by collaborating and doing it in a structured, strategic way, you get so much more value for what you want to achieve in the end. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you so much, Tanja, and thank you so much to my panelists. We really need to do this with a bit more time so we can double click and learn way more. Tanja, thanks so much for allowing us to do a dream come true. We wanted to test how we could have fellows actually allowing corporate leaders to learn and to share, and you just made that possible. So thank you, and Boehringer, for allowing that dream to come true.